Hey there, party people! It's time to talk about another extra class. This time being probably my favorite class, foreigners. Previously, in my video talking about my issues with pretenders, I point out that the classifications for the class look straightforward on paper, but are actually a mess in execution. Foreigners suffer a bit from that as well, but in a more mitigated fashion. And I want to cover that first and foremost before diving into the really cool stuff. Foreigners can be split up into two categories. I like to call them true foreigners, being the servants that are vessels for outer gods, and catch-all foreigners, being either servants specifically modified to be a foreigner, are just from outer space and don't neatly fit anything else, or are Voyager. No shade on my boy, of course, but he's only a foreigner in FGO because they did not want to have to implement the Voyager class and still wanted that sweet, sweet gacha money. Aoko honestly falls somewhere between the former two subcategories though, but given that she's Aoko, she can be whatever class she wants. That's fine by me. You do you, queen. Fifth magic just kinda be like that. Not getting into it here. Anyway, that leaves the rest of the catch-all foreigners being Mysterious Heroine XX, Mysterious Idol X Alter, Koyanskaya of Darkness, Kukulan, Naknarai Yarandu, and Wanjina. I'm sorry if I mispronounced either of those last two. They are very hard names to pronounce. And honestly, all of these characters are honestly just aliens, and that explanation can probably be enough. And while I do want to leave it at that and get to the interesting ones, I will give quick breakdowns. Some things will be oversimplified. Double X is from the Servant universe, where all inhabitants probably qualify as foreigners, but in this case her spirit origin was specifically modified to combat outer gods, giving her the foreigner class as it is strong against itself. Idol X Alter is also from the Servant universe, and that seems to be really the only reason. Koyanskaya of Darkness is the personification of the meteor that caused the Tunguska incident, so space. Kukulan, interestingly, is one of the two foreigners that doesn't have the passive skill Existence Outside the Domain. But Mayan deities came from space. This version is from a lost belt and has connections to the Ultimate One Ort, so yeah, that's pretty alien, I guess. And I suppose, beyond human comprehension? That is also a qualification, I think. Nuk also doesn't have that passive skill either, and she is also from a lost belt, and is somehow linked to Yarandu, beings from Aboriginal myth that seem to come from space. This is the one where I feel like they are scraping the bottom of the barrel the most. Like they have a quota for how many foreigners they need to release, but can't give us the good one before the foreigner ordeal call comes out. Wajina is also from Aboriginal myth, but has the passive skill this time, and is also apparently from the Servant verse. Reading up on this entity has some outer god vibes, but less in the horror kind of way. Firmly falls into the beyond human comprehension and space categories. And that covers all of the catch-all foreigners. Though it is also worth mentioning that while all the Servant First characters that I mentioned here have existence outside the domain, interestingly enough, Mysterious Ronmaru X has it as well, but no other Servant-verse character does. Hell, even Okita J Shoji has it, but she was at least modified by Double X, so sure, why not? Unrestrained summer fun. One other non-foreigner has the skill as well, but we'll touch on her later. For now, let's start getting into the fun part. True foreigners are all tied to outer gods, which are Fate's version of the entities from Cthulhu mythos. Entities from a different universe altogether. Something beyond every parallel universe that has been perceived. They are unknowingly powerful and completely outside of human understanding, physics, and magecraft. Their very existence undoes our reality as they try to worm their way through the gate to take Earth, claiming it and its life forms as their own. They are first introduced in the pseudo-singularity Salem, with our very first foreigner, Abigail Williams, who I will bet my leftmost toe is going to be a major figure once again in the inevitable foreigner ordeal call. She is the vessel of Sut Typhoon, or Yog-Sothoth, the all-in-one and one-in-all. And don't you worry, there are more mispronunciations to come. The actual Lovecraftian names for the outer gods are not used in Fate Grand Order proper, and are mostly speculative, though this one is closer to concrete. If I do mention others at any point, I will do my best to fully clarify if the name being used is speculation or not. Sut Typhoon is both the gate and the key, bordering at all edges of various realities and dimensions, behind many gates. To open a gate is to invite madness. To open another is to enter the void. Another to understand everything. Another to understand nothing. Gate after gate until you are before the ultimate gate, where on the other side the all-in-one resides. A torrent of malice, of insanity, of... No words in the human languages can properly describe what is on the other side of the final gate. All that is known is that a single young girl holds the key. Abigail is the template for how we understand true foreigners. They contain all of these unfathomable powers, are connected to things that no other human would be able to survive even thinking about. And yet, they share a certain compatibility with them. Abby seemingly most of all after Van Gogh. Her story is by far the most interesting, not to say that the others aren't interesting at all. It is shown in the 3 versions we have of her. And yes, I do mean 3. The Abigail Williams that we summoned to Chaldea is not the same Abigail that we met in Salem. Instead, she is something like an avatar of hers, with full autonomy of her own. The true Abby is somewhere out there, traveling the spaces between, learning more and more, missing all of those she had lost. Sometimes there are moments where she will appear through the Abigail of Chaldea, and perhaps one day the two shall merge fully and become something greater. And then we have the 2 versions of the Abby of Chaldea. The original one we summon and her summer variant, the only summer servant, that isn't BB, to share the same class as her original version. There is something noteworthy about that, as it means, essentially, her spirit origin is largely unmodified, but it also shows some level of evolution. In her original self, Abby goes from the sweet innocent girl to being largely possessed, or rather influenced by Sut Typhoon. However, in her later summer variant, the opposite is true. She starts off under that heavy influence and progresses to having greater control over her sense of self and her powers. And this, to me, shows great potential for future story beats. And though while Abigail is one of my favorite characters, it is unfair to have her hog all of the spotlight. And we have a theory to get to involving 3 of these true foreigners. Have you ever noticed a connection that all the true foreigners share? And no, it's not the idea of them dying under questionable circumstances or disappearing in history. This is something that has never been called out in the game's narrative. It is the fact that each of them is a female host. Hokusai the man is indeed the foreigner, but is stuck as an octopus while his daughter functions as the main servant. However, as more of the outer god's powers manifest through ascension, and Hokusai merges with his daughter, the form remains that of a woman. Van Gogh is said to be the perfect candidate to be an outer god's vessel, and while yes, he refused, so he had to be mixed in with a separate spirit origin, in this case Clytie, the end result is that the body is firmly female. Is this just to further suppress Van Gogh's anti-outer god nature? Or is there something deeper? The one that clinches it is the last true foreigner that we have received, Jacques de Molay. Originally a man, and even being summoned as a man in Fate Grand Order Arcade before the foreigner came out, he is for some reason summoned as a woman while being a foreigner, even to the point where the character's stated gender in the game is female. As far as I've seen, there is no stated reason for this, but isn't it just fascinating? Yes, it may have something to do with the specific outer god being the black goat, but again, there is no concrete reason given. Even in Fate Requiem, we have the foreigner Euclid, who is also a woman. Though in that case, I am unsure if Euclid is always a woman in Fate's history, or if it is indeed the same case as Molay. Before Molay, it could probably be argued as coincidence that Hokusai and Van Gogh weren't properly male in their summoning. But since Molay doesn't have a clear-cut explanation that can be given, I believe it proves something. The Outer Gods, for whatever reason, need their vessels to be female. I am not brushed up on Lovecraftian lore, but I don't think there is a direct connection outside of, possibly, the original version of Lavinia from the Dunwich Horror, where she birthed the children of Yog Sothoth. Given her version in FGO being very unrelated to that, I don't think that's the source of this, but it is possible. And either way, priestesses being vessels for deities is not uncommon, and that might be the idea here. Regardless, there is no canonical statement about it. But given the evidence, I do believe that it is very likely that Van Gogh would have likely been turned into a woman if summoned as a foreigner by himself. I would love to get an in-universe explanation for this. It is fascinating to consider, and it is why I made my own foreigner servant a gender-bent version of Ku's son Kanla, not wanting to buck the trend. Hopefully this is something that will get touched upon when the story eventually gets to the foreigner ordeal call, much like how eventually this video will end. But hey, if you made it this far, you must be enjoying it. If you are, why not hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more Fate videos and other anime stuff. Anyway, right now, there are still 2 more true foreigners to talk about. Though, sadly, I don't really have too much to say about Yang Gufei, despite her being the secondary antagonist of Imaginary Scramble. Which is honestly very sad because she's a lovely character, and I really wish she would just come home. Though it is interesting that she is one of the true foreigners that didn't have a connection to madness in her life. Van Gogh was, of course, tormented by madness leading to his death. Abigail incited madness by being one of the girls to kickstart the Salem witch trials, and so on. In the story, it is speculated that it may have something to do with some mysteries surrounding her death. Though, I did say there were 2 more. And you've probably double-checked the names that I've mentioned and cross-referenced the list of foreigners in the game. You're not going mad yourself. I did indeed cover 14 foreigner servants. But the last true foreigner isn't actually a foreigner.
BB Channel!
That's right, it's your Kohai and mine, Summer BB. During the events of Luluhawa, BB looks through a telescope and just kind of vibes with the outer god.
Hotep.
You read it yourself, I'm not even trying. Again, as stated before, that name is not used in the game proper, but we're very certain and confident that it's the Crawling Chaos. She's called BB Hotep. Yeah, and honestly, how very appropriate for this mischievous AI. But the question is, if she is a true foreigner playing host to an outer god, why isn't she actually the foreigner class? And honestly, it's just because she's BB, and technically isn't a host per se. BB doesn't stop being BB for nobody, even entities that the whole of human consciousness can't fathom. In computer terms, she linked herself to the outer god's Wi-Fi, but didn't share any of the files on the network. Though it is also because they desperately needed to fill out the moon cancer slots for players to summon, again for that sweet, sweet gacha money. But that's not the fun answer, no matter how accurate it is. And with that, that's the whole of the foreigner class explained, mostly. Went a bit broad strokes in places to try and make this more palatable. Read the Imaginary Scramble event, that goes a lot more into the nitty-gritty. As said before, this is probably my favorite class, and has one of my favorite characters in it. the implications and the theories and the general storytelling surrounding these characters and the Outer Gods is just so amazing. Always a fun time. The weakest was honestly Molay's introduction, but even then, she is fascinating with her implications and design. I've brought it up so many times in this video already, but I am really excited to get the Foreigner Ordeal call. Saying they're going to skip it just confirms that they are going to be diving in there eventually. Maybe we'll get a return of Salem Abbey. Maybe we'll get a new Super Abbey servant. I'd also love if Euclid was in it. Apparently she refers to things as Euclidean or non-Euclidean, like how Altera refers to things as good civilization or bad civilization, and I love that. There is still so much that can be done with true foreigners and Outer Gods that I can't even think of it all. What are the things that you want to see from foreigners going forward? I am losing my voice while recording. Let me know down in the comments below. I am interested to find out. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time in the void. Later.